All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're diving headfirst into the reign of one of history's most notorious figures, Ivan the Terrible. Ivan IV, the first Tsar of Russia, ruled for a whopping 51 years, from 1547 to 1584. And well, as the name suggests, his time on the throne was, let's just say, eventful.
You could definitely say that.
Yeah.
Ivan's reign was a period of immense transformation for Russia. Expansions, reforms, and a whole lot of, well, we'll get into that.
That's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right? We've got piles of historical accounts and analyses, and our mission is to really grasp the why behind Ivan. What drove him? How did he shift from early successes to the, let's call it, intense ruler he's remembered as? I mean, it's like there were two sides to the man.
That's a really good point, and one that historians still debate to this day. It's not a simple good guy turns bad situation.
Yeah.
To truly understand Ivan, I think we need to look way back, like all the way back to his childhood.
Okay, so childhood. What was going on in young Ivan's world that might have shaped him?
Picture this. You're 3 years old, and your father, the Grand Prince, dies. Then your mother, Elena Glinskaya, she steps up to rule, but then she dies too, just 5 years later. And get this, the circumstances around her death were, shall we say, suspicious.
So you're talking foul play, poisoning.
You hit the nail on the head. Poisoning was, well, it was pretty common back then for getting rid of rivals, especially political ones, and many believed the boyars were behind it.
Wait, boyars, for those who aren't familiar with like medieval Russian politics, could you give us a quick rundown?
Of course, think of boyars as the top tier of Russian nobility. These were the powerful families, super influential, always vying for more control.
Okay, so little Ivan is surrounded by these boyars who potentially probably were involved in his mom's death. I can see how that would leave a mark, you know?
Absolutely, imagine the impact. You're a kid growing up surrounded by potential enemies. Whispers of schemes, betrayals, probably everywhere. Talk about a breeding ground for paranoia and distrust.
And wouldn't that feeling be even stronger because these boyars were, in theory, supposed to be like his protectors, guiding him as the young ruler?
Exactly. That perceived betrayal, whether real or imagined, is crucial to understanding what Ivan does later on. It's like this seed of suspicion that just grows and grows, affecting his relationships and eventually his whole reign. However, we can't paint his early years as all doom and gloom. He actually accomplished quite a bit before things took a turn.
Right. There were some definite wins early on. He was a reformer in some ways, wasn't he?
He was. In his early 20s, he pushed through some significant legal reforms aimed at streamlining and centralizing power. He even established something like an early parliament, the Zemsky Sobor, to, give different social classes a bit of a voice.
Okay, so not exactly the actions of a bloodthirsty tyrant, right? It seems like he was actually trying to improve Russia. What else was he up to during this time?
Well, he was really focused on expanding Russian territory. He led successful campaigns against the Khanats of Kazan and Astrakhan, adding a huge amount of land to the east and south. He even made inroads into Siberia, basically laying the groundwork for Russia's eastward expansion.
Wow. Kazan, Astrakhan, Siberia,
Right.
all before he hit 30. That's a pretty impressive track record for a young ruler.
You're telling me. These early achievements definitely paint him as a smart strategist, ambitious, driven to make Russia a major power. But then, as we know, a shift happened.
Yeah, 1560 seems to be a big turning point in his story, right? The year his wife, Anastasia Romanovna, died. What do we know about her and what their relationship was like?
From what historians have pieced together, Anastasia was a really good influence on Ivan. She was known for her piety and gentle nature, and they seemed to have a genuine connection, really devoted to each other. So her death, though the cause is still debated, it really shook him.
I can only imagine losing someone you love so deeply, especially in those times when death was so common. But why is her death seen as such a pivotal moment by historians?
Because after Anastasia dies, Ivan's paranoia and suspicions go through the roof. He became convinced she was poisoned, and of course he blamed the boyars. Remember that deep-seated distrust we talked about stemming from his childhood? Well, this seemed to confirm his worst fears and basically push him over the edge.
So it was like a catalyst. It didn't create his darker tendencies, but maybe like unleashed them.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's like a dam bursting, releasing years of anger, fear, suspicion all at once. This, on top of his pre-existing worldview, sets the stage for the reign of terror he becomes known for. To really get that, we need to delve into the Oprichnina, one of the most infamous chapters of his rule, but we'll save that for after a quick speak. Okay, so the Oprichnina. Ivan establishes this thing in 1565. Picture this. Ivan, he goes and declares a chunk of Russia, like a big chunk, as his own personal territory, completely separate from the existing government. It's like a state within a state. And he puts his own hand-picked enforcers in charge.
That's crazy. It's like he just split the country up. What was the point of this Oprichnina thing? And who were these enforcers? Enforcers doesn't really seem to cut it.
You're right, enforcers is a bit too tame.
Mm.
They were called the Oprichniki. They're more like Ivan's personal, I don't know, army of fear. Dressed all in black, riding black horses, and get this, their horses were decked out with symbols of death, like dog's head, to sniff out treason, and a broom to sweep it away. Yeah, their whole purpose was to get rid of anyone Ivan saw as a threat. And they weren't exactly known for their gentle touch.
That's some seriously chilling imagery. Dog's head, broom, all in black. It's like something out of a nightmare. I mean, did people in this Oprichnina just live in constant fear?
Pretty much. The Oprichniki had a ridiculous amount of power. They could seize land, torture, execute, all on just a suspicion of disloyalty. Boyar, peasant, priest, didn't matter. If Ivan even thought you were a problem, you were in trouble.
So this was more than a political purge, right? It sounds like he was terrorizing the whole population. Was there any logic to it? Or was it just random?
It's tough to say for sure. Some historians think Ivan used the Oprichnina to, systematically dismantle the boyar's power and make himself even stronger. Others say he was just so paranoid by this point, he was going after anyone who even looked at him funny. Whether they were a real threat or not, it didn't matter.
Either way, it sounds terrifying. What was the overall impact on Russia?
Oh, it was devastating. Entire communities were wiped out, families torn apart, thousands killed. It created this atmosphere of fear and suspicion everywhere. Like, imagine what that does to the economy, to the whole social fabric of the country. Just crippled it.
And there was that awful massacre in Novgorod, right? That one always stood out to me.
Yeah, the Novgorod massacre in 1570, that's a prime example of just how brutal the Oprichnina was.
Yeah.
Based on honestly really weak accusations of treason, Ivan sends the Oprichniki in, and, well, thousands are killed, including women and children. This city, known for its wealth, its culture, reduced to ruins, it's awful.
It's hard to fathom the scale of it. It really shows how far Ivan had fallen from those early days of reform and expansion, a complete 180.
For sure. And it gets even more disturbing when you realize that Ivan's paranoia and rage, it didn't stop with, perceived enemies or political rivals. His own family wasn't safe from it.
You're talking about what happened with his son, right? That's always been one of the most shocking parts of Ivan's story, at least for me.
Exactly. In 1581, they get into this heated argument, and Ivan, he strikes his eldest son and heir, Ivan Ivanovich, in the head with his staff. The injuries were fatal. Ivanovich died a few days later.
To kill your own son, your heir, I mean, how do you even process that level of rage and violence? What even started the argument, do we know?
The exact details are murky, lots of conflicting accounts. Some sources say they were arguing about military strategy. Others say it was something personal involving Ivanovich's wife. But honestly, whatever the trigger was, the point is, this act shows just how deeply troubled and unstable Ivan was.
It makes you wonder about his state of mind. This is a man who built churches, reformed laws, expanded his empire, but then he was capable of this horrific cruelty, even towards his own blood. It's hard to reconcile those two sides.
It is. And that's the paradox of Ivan, isn't it? He was extremely devout, saw himself as a defender of the Orthodox faith, but his actions, so often, were the opposite of Christian. He'd even go on pilgrimages and repent for his sins, and then come back and do even worse things.
It's like he saw himself as both sinner and savior, capable of immense evil, but also capable of great piety. It's fascinating and disturbing, a real psychological puzzle.
Totally. And it raises the question, can we really separate the good from the bad when we look at these historical figures? Can we acknowledge the things Ivan achieved without condoning the brutality?
It's a tough question, but it's one we have to think about as we try to understand his legacy. Before we get to that, though, I want to talk about his religious devotion. I mean, how do we square his faith with the violence he inflicted? It doesn't seem to add up.
That's a key question. It gets to the core of how Ivan saw the world. He believed in the divine right of kings. Like, he saw himself as God's chosen instrument to punish sinners and protect Russia. It's a twisted kind of justification, but it seems like it let him reconcile his faith with his cruelty. He genuinely believed he was doing God's work, even when that work involved unimaginable things.
Man, we've covered a lot about Ivan. His rough childhood, his early attempts at reform, the expansion of Russia, and then, well, the descent into the Oprichnina and all the horrors that came with it. His paranoia and rage, it's heavy stuff.
Yeah, no kidding. As we wrap up here, I keep thinking about that question you brought up earlier. Can we really separate the good from the bad when we talk about Ivan the Terrible? Like, how do we even begin to assess his legacy, knowing all these contradictions and complexities we've talked about?
It's like we're looking at two completely different people, right? There's the brilliant strategist, the reformer who tried to modernize Russia, this devout guy who built churches and saw himself as a defender of his faith.
And then there's the tyrant, the ruler consumed by paranoia, who unleashes this reign of terror on his people. The one behind the Oprichnina, the Novgorod massacre, the one who kills his own son in a fit of rage.
So, how do we reconcile those two extremes? How do we even begin to unpack a legacy like that?
Well, I think the first step is to just admit that with historical figures, it's rarely a simple good versus evil thing. They're products of their time,
Yeah.
shaped by their experiences, their beliefs, their traumas, their ambitions. It's all tangled up together.
That makes sense. It's easy to want to oversimplify history, put everyone into neat little boxes, heroes and villains, but it's rarely that clear cut.
Nope. And Ivan is like the poster child for that. We can't just erase the awful things he did, but at the same time, we can't ignore his achievements and how they impacted Russia's future.
So, how do we judge him? Do we weigh the good against the bad and try to come up with some scorecard? Or is there a better way to think about it?
I think the most important thing is to approach figures like Ivan critically. Examine their actions, but in the context of their time. Try to understand what might have influenced their decisions, their worldview. It's not about making excuses, but about getting a fuller picture.
That's what we've tried to do here today, right? Not to excuse Ivan, but to explore the why behind the man, the forces that shaped him, the good and the bad, and ultimately understand the legacy he left, both positive and deeply troubling.
Exactly. And by doing that, I think we gain a much deeper understanding, not just of Ivan, but of history itself. We see the complexities of human nature and the constant struggle between power, ambition, morality. It's all in there.
And maybe, by understanding the past, even the darkest parts, we can learn something for today. It's a reminder that power, especially when it's unchecked and fueled by fear, paranoia, that's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. It highlights how important critical thinking is. We need to question those in power, speak up against injustice, and always, always push for empathy and compassion in everything we do.
Well said. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Ivan the Terrible, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've examined the events, his motivations, the complicated, often contradictory nature of his reign. But there's one big question that lingers. Does understanding the context of Ivan's time, does that make his actions any less terrible? Does it change how we judge him? Or does it just make the whole thing more complex, leaving us with more questions than answers? Food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.